Hello everyone, welcome back to TUJ room. My name is Midori Kankeo and I'm hosting this program on behalf of school, and I'm also a member of the board. Today our second guest, I'm very happy to introduce you to Bob Noddin, CEO of AIU Japan.
Hi, how are you?
So thanks for joining.
Glad to be here.
And thanks for your support, great support for TUJ.
Well, it's a nice change from the daily work environment, so gives you stimulation and a chance to have some fun in a different way. So I'm happy to be part of it. It's been a good serving so far.
Wonderful. So AIU, it has a very long history in Japan.
Yeah. AIU, it's a great history. It started 1946 in Japan. It came here when shortly after the war, when General MacArthur asked our first chairman, C.B. Starr, to send some people in here to support the U.S. military forces that are in here following the war. So we started out 66 years ago, helping out on a very small basis, and now we're about a $3 billion operation in Japan with 62 branch offices around the country and about 4,000 staff. So it keeps me busy.
Wow, so you were the first foreign insurance firm?
We were the first foreign insurance company, and we're part of a group called the Chartis Group, which is actually part of the American International Group, AIG, which people might know from 3 or 4 years ago that was given that bad reputation for things that happened. But the Chartis Group actually owns 3 companies here in Japan. So AIU is the largest of the foreign companies that it owns. It also owns a company called American Home, which people know as the direct automobile underwriter. They were sort of the first to innovate in that space. And then last year we completed a long-standing process of acquiring a local company called Fuji Fire and Marine Insurance Company, which is about a 91 or 92-year-old company. So we own all 3 of those companies together. That's about close to $8.5 billion worth of business in Japan. About 15,000 employees across the country. So.
And so if you look at the global market, what's the importance of Japan?
Well, great question. Japan is our largest market outside of the United States. It represents about somewhere between 23 and 27% of our total revenue worldwide. In terms of the global insurance market, Japan is one of the largest insurance markets in the world in terms of the savings, the investment component of it. There's a huge part of that that's life insurance related. But as a very strong and very developed marketplace in terms of the industrial capability and the population, Japan is one of the largest insurance markets in the world.
Well, surprising. With the rapid aging, the demographics,
right.
Is it the tailwind or headwind for your business?
Well, there's challenges in a lot of ways in that respect. First, the aging population creates challenges for the future relative to the next generation of consumers. Right? I know that's an issue with GE. It's certainly a question and a concern from a Chartis and an AIG standpoint. But that also brings opportunities, right? So, for example, there is an enormous need for support to the elderly. That's not only a product issue, but that's a service issue. So nursing homes and assisted living facilities, they have unique insurance needs. That's not something that traditionally was a big market in Japan, but it's going to grow in Japan. So for the next 20 or 30 years, there's new markets that develop here. The challenge that it also presents is as companies of all sizes look to grow their business capability, they get concerned about that aging population in Japan, so they say, well, where can we grow? What markets can we tap into to continue to grow as a company themselves? And Chartis, the parent of AIU, is the largest foreign property casualty business anywhere in the world. So we operate in 90 countries around the world. We have a network that's unrivaled from any of our competition, both Japanese or any of the foreign companies. And so our ability to sell the capability to connect to the rest of the world and get your coverages in places like China or Argentina or South Africa or Romania, as an example, the local competitors can't touch that, and our foreign competitors can't touch that in terms of scale.
So instead of operating each business independently, you're really integrating where it makes sense and leveraging.
Yeah, that's a key part of it, Midori, because when you look at how, I think the market has changed, the economy has changed in Japan, and the history of how major corporations associated themselves with each other in the past has evolved too. In the insurance industry in particular, 15 years ago there were 42 general insurance companies. Right? Now there's 3 that control 85% of the market. And everybody else is running around looking for their presence. Right? So the Chartis Group is the largest foreign company by a long shot. Right? We've got about more than 8% of the market share between our 3 companies. But as Japanese companies look at their global expansion, as they look at their need to run a more transparent business than they have in the past, they need to have better access to support on a global basis. And while Japanese insurance companies have a presence in a number of locations, they've tended to do that through acquisition. So they bought a company in China, or they bought a company in Indonesia, and integrating them is not an easy task, right? In our case, we've been an international company since our founding in 1919. We started in Shanghai, China. Right? We didn't have a U.S. operation until the mid-30s. So our business has largely, not exclusively, but largely grown organically. Around the world, we've built these things from within. So our integration capability is part of what we've always been about. So it makes it easier for us to connect to that and sell to that market.
Yeah. So in terms of the diversity, I mean, it's there. You're, truly global organization. But what about the share, market share in the U.S.? I mean, not market share, but the business in the U.S. versus
okay, that's a great question. The markets around the world are not the same. People have needs, but the markets themselves don't always look the same. Right. So in the United States, for example, there is an enormous large ticket commercial marketplace. There's a very big middle market, SME and sort of corporate space, and then there's a consumer base. We don't do a huge consumer piece of business in the United States. We had it. We sold that business a few years ago. So we're very much a large commercial insurance company in the United States, and we are the leader and the largest in the U.S. market. Come to Japan, and we are very much a consumer and a small, medium enterprise market player in Japan. We're growing in the large corporate space, but that's a process of the industry in Japan changing, the Keiretsu world changing its behavior, changing the way it interacts with each other, is opening up opportunities for us, not only here, but certainly overseas.
That's great. So from sort of B2B business model to where Japan is more B2C focused, you need a different capability, different kind of employee base. Yeah,
and we do B2B and we do B2B2C, business to customers. Right? So a tremendous amount of my business comes from what we call borrowed distribution. By that I mean that I'm selling insurance to people whose primary job is not to sell insurance. They might be a real estate agent, and they're selling a renter's program to somebody on a 2-year basis, or they might be a house builder. Right? Asahi Kasei, one of the largest chemical and housing manufacturing companies in the country, is a big partner of mine. And as they build a house, they sell the insurance business with it. So we have very diversified ways to sell business, right? We do some direct to customers, we do a lot through these borrowed channels, and we do a lot through a more traditional insurance agency operation. So I need flexibility in the skills and the capabilities of my staff.
Is that agent contract? Or how do you...
Yeah, the rules are very clear in Japan relative to insurance. They have to be licensed, but they license in a very narrow focus. They're licensed to sell certain products. Right? But that does not prevent me from going back to that customer that they gave to me and looking at other things to sell them. And I can do that B2C directly. I can use contact centers, which I have large ones in Toyama and Okinawa, and I can reach out to the customers directly.
So you have 2 call centers in Japan?
I personally, in AIU, have 2 very large ones. The largest is in Toyama. Between the processing support team and the contact center, people have about 500 people there. And then I have a smaller but support backup. It does its own functions, but it also backs up the Toyota site of about 90 people in Okinawa. And my sister company, American Home, does just the opposite. They have about 500 people in Okinawa and about 100 in Toyama. We share infrastructure and overall facilities management, but have our own unique capabilities in each of those locations.
They brought this.
They brought that, that's right, right? That's them. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, you also have identified a new sort of market creation of the elderly, like housing.
Yes. So there's the market growth around elderly support and senior support services is clearly a growth opportunity for us. And as I said, the global piece of it is big. And I think that's where, for example, what a TUJ student offers an employer in the future is unique in the sense that, these students are liberal arts. They're certainly bilingual if they're not Native American speakers, right? And because of the diversity of where they come from and their backgrounds, when you look at what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to clearly connect to the rest of the world. So I'm looking for people that are speaking at least 2 languages to be able to support that. We've been working on a strategy of strengthening our field presence, and unsolicited from me, 2 of my vice presidents came back to me and said, we want to hire some Japanese and Chinese, or Japanese and Korean, or Japanese and Vietnamese speaking staff who can help us begin to become more connected with those global markets as we grow. So the need to have both a flexible way of thinking as well as the comfort around a language capability is extremely important.
Well, thank you for driving the conversation, because I really wanted to ask you about the kind of talent you're looking, for the growth.
Right.
Yeah, and what kind of traits.
Right.
If you are interviewing someone, what are you really looking for, especially for Japan?
Well, I'm going to give you 2 completely different experiences, right? So I hired a TUJ grad a little over a year ago, a guy named Steve Grapperhaus, rather unique characteristics. He had been a U.S. Marine serving in Okinawa. When he graduated, he used the U.S. GI Bill. He came to TUJ. He loved it. He pushed himself through in less than 4 years. I picked him up because I have a large portfolio of military business. All of these U.S. military bases have a lot of people who have insurance needs. I insure a lot of them. I needed somebody who understood that. Steve's Japanese was very solid. He had a knowledge of the market I was trying to grow in. He liked Japan and wanted to stay here. It was a perfect fit.
Well, he behaved more like Japanese than
well, and frankly, I get told that frequently too. I'm more Japanese than a lot of Japanese people. But likewise, so let's go to the other extreme. So I'm sitting in a meeting 2 days ago getting presentations that people have worked on for 3 months. And my guy in my Nagoya operation, who's looking to expand his capabilities, sits down with me and says, I need to hire some Chinese-speaking staff and some Korean-speaking staff because my industries that are in my target market are extensively and aggressively looking to expand into those Chinese or Korean markets, where they already work in those markets. And I could do a lot more if I had people with that capability. The challenge with that is it's not just a language issue, right? Culture and understanding the variations in culture and how you get on a plane and you get off a plane 2 hours later in Korea or 2.5 hours, 3 hours later in Shanghai. And it's not just a language issue.
Right.
It's about how you do business, and it's about how you respond to that. That is the key to success. And that's where you have to have a process of learning and a process of thinking that isn't rigid and isn't repetitive and isn't based on memorization. It's about your ability to adapt and your ability to respond to the things around you and be critical in your decisions to be able to make the right moves forward. So.
Well, I mean, those sort of the memory-based and process-oriented. I mean, we've really been shaped that way for decades through the local education,
right.
and kind of difficult to really get away from it. If you're looking at the real Japanese natives, what are the sort of the success rate, being in ANU and become the managers and leaders versus
Well, it's a great question. Let's define first the difference between a manager and a leader, right? Management, my team has no challenges from a management standpoint. Are they capable of managing a team of people? Are they capable of managing an agenda around a project or a budget or a piece of business? No problem. But when you want to adapt, when you want to compare yourself to the market, when you want to look in the future and see how things are going to change, that's not a management issue. That's a leadership issue. They're not the same, right? And I think, frankly, we struggle at times to break through traditional thinking. We struggle to break through, seniority-based, male-dominated environments that is so common in Japan. And yet the difference between those who succeed and fail will come down to how you respond to that. So to me, we need to continue to place an emphasis on that. We need to continue to recognize that. We need to continue to infuse new talent and new ideas and new capability and an environment that allows that and accepts that. So to me, a lot of the traditional behaviors that are normal in the marketplace, we need to adapt.
Yeah, it makes me think about some of the Japanese companies who are really trying to globalize the organization, and they say, okay, we start speaking in English.
Yeah.
Uniqlo
and etc. Right.
It's but like you're saying, it's not the language.
Yeah, so I do a good amount of business with large Japanese corporations, and it's growing rapidly. So I'll give you some examples. I do a tremendous amount of business with the traditional trading companies, right, in Japan. Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, Marubeni, Sojitsu, that type of groups. They by nature are a bit more global in their thought process. Their history has been about investment and about expansion into markets in key industries that they're aligned with. They have a team of people that I typically work with who have all had overseas experience. They need people who speak English or a foreign language to be comfortable to go be based, for example, in Miami and handle South America. They need someone who can go to the Southeast Asian marketplace and handle their energy investments or their mineral investments in Indonesia or their expansion into the Australian marketplace. They need people who can manage their European operations. That doesn't necessarily come from a traditional Japanese education environment, right? Because it's not just about learning the English, it's about learning the culture and learning to adapt and respond to and be flexible in a foreign environment.
So in terms of hiring, so they're looking for non-Japanese, more sort of custom.
They're certainly looking for either people who are more globally, culturally aware. They're looking and they're more receptive to people who aren't native Japanese. They're looking for people who have a willingness and an interest in saying, okay, I'll go. I'm not sure what to expect, but I'm willing to go out there and give it a try. And it's I have to tell a little secret, right? When I was a college student, which seems a long time ago, I was an exchange student. And I came to Japan. So I had no idea what to expect. I know that for the 20 minutes my plane was landing in Osaka, and I looked out the window and saw these blue porcelain roofs all over the place, and electrical cable and towers all over the place. I thought to myself, what the heck am I doing? What did I get myself into? But literally within a couple of hours settling in, etc., I thought, you know what? By the time I left 5 months later, my view was, I can take on anything, right? Because you go through that self-confidence building process and you go through a world of realizing you may not know what's being said to you at any one point in time, but you have strategies and techniques for solving that problem. And I think that that's where the future lies, and the strength of what TUJ can offer companies, what it can offer its students, and what we can offer to the marketplace through this process is a willingness and a capability to take on any new challenge. That's the difference to me between liberal arts and a structured, traditional educational process. You learn to adapt, you learn to question, and you learn to think on your feet.
Well, how old were you when you first
I was
landed?
21 when I jumped on the
21.
plane.
Did you have any overseas experience
None.
before that?
I didn't speak any Japanese. I had studied German, Spanish, Russian before I got
Not very useful here.
No, it didn't get me very far. And my father worked for Polaroid cameras, you know, the instant guys. And in the early days of his employment, they subcontracted to Yashica to build their cameras, and then they branded them as Polaroid and sold them in the States, and he was responsible for helping make that happen. So he was coming over here in the early 60s in that process, and he just had no idea what was going on around him. So partially his talking about it and his reaction to it as a young businessman when I was a little kid probably whet my appetite to get out here and to do that.
Lucky you, knowing that father. But so instead of being intimidated without being able to understand, being able to communicate, you could really unleash your inner strength and be confident. And
I mean, you have to have the self-confidence to say, well, I'm not sure what's going to be around the corner, but I'm prepared to deal with it. And I think that's a big switch to a traditional educational environment. That's a big switch to Japanese companies as we go forward. That's a big switch in this marketplace. We can't necessarily behave the way it always worked before because it's changed.
And especially today.
And changing faster than ever before. You know, you look at the demographics, you look at the marriage rate, you look at females in the workforce, you look at, just look at, I love to tell people when I first came here in 1982, the Chinese economy didn't exist, right? And the Japanese economy was clearly second in the world. Now, 30 years later, guess what? Right? The Chinese economy is bigger than the Japanese economy, and if the U.S. isn't careful, it's going to catch them before long, right? So things change, and the flexibility to respond to that is the key to success and failure.
So, if you're looking at the sort of global talent pool in Japan for your company here, it's quite competitive, isn't it? Yeah. And it's very limited.
It is, and it's and I genuinely need a workforce that's more flexible and adaptive, because they're going to be dealing with people from around the world who are going to bring best practices, they're going to bring product ideas, they're going to bring service ideas from 92 countries around the world to Japan and say, hey, this is working in South America, or this is working in Southeast Asia, or India. How do we make that attractive to the Japanese customer? And so they have to be more agile, and they have to be more flexible.
So is TUJ one of the areas that you definitely be looking for talent?
Yeah, there's no, and I'll tell you frankly, when I took over this job recently, I looked at the way we did recruiting, and I said, first of all, you're being very traditional in terms of the cycle of recruiting. Second of all, you're not paying attention to where you're going to find the kind of thinkers that you really want, right? And if you continue to do it the way you're doing it, you're creating an expectation on one hand that you're not supporting with the way the pipeline of talent that you put into the organization at the same time. So it's easy when you're the CEO, so I brought in my communications and HR team and said, you're recruiting in the wrong place, and you're going about it the wrong way, so we need to change that. And with my first TUJ hire, he's been an enormous success. He's well liked in the company, he's energetic, and he's made a big difference. So
I should be sending him the link to this.
He'll see it. He'll see it. He talks to me about it all the time. He goes to the TUJ nights frequently. He knows, so he talks about it all the time. So he's actually in Okinawa right now, helping me recognize and celebrate the joint Japanese Self-Defense Forces U.S. military's recognition of their key enlisted personnel on an annual basis. So he's down there at a big black tie event with the Japanese generals and the U.S. generals and colonels celebrating, great accomplishments in the military. So
I wanted to switch the subject a little bit because young generation in Japan not knowing the good times, you know, it's
Right.
just a constant decline.
Right.
And,
Right.
but their values are different from older generation somewhat, and you know, very much interested in the corporate citizenship, doing something for the others. And in terms of the CSR citizenship, what is AIU doing in Japan?
Well, so a great question, and it's a little bit of a softball pitch to me. AIU has, we're in our 26th year of what we call the High School Diplomats Program. This is something that has had several thousand students cycle through it. And what we do is we have a competition through Japanese high schools around the country. The students write an English language essay. We pick between 25 to 35 winners every year. We send them for a several-week program in the United States during the summer. They work with American students that we recruit to do a Japanese essay in the United States. They work together at Princeton University. They use that trip to also go visit places like Chicago or Philadelphia or Boston. And then the following year, those U.S. students come over to Japan and go through a homestay program that's reciprocal of what the students and the Japanese students have done. Every year we send a new group of Japanese students to the United States, and every other year they welcome, when they return, they welcome those students back here. We spend a lot of money on that. We invest very heavily in it. It's been very well received. That's the big one.
Quite impressive. I mean, the U.S.-Japan cultural exchange. I mean, the development.
Right.
And you know,
we do a tremendous amount of business with what we call school programs around the country. So we provide, and we have partnerships with hundreds of PTA associations around the country, and provide student accidental and medical coverage around the country, right? So this was a logical way to sort of give back in that process. And we pay the expenses. We cover all the costs. We make sure everybody's safe and secure in that process. We do cover it both ways. Yeah. We have participation with a group called the Freeman Foundation, where the grandfather of the guy who runs that foundation now actually was one of the founders of our company. So there's a great history on that side as well. And they actually do some Freeman Foundation then takes that another step and takes it into sponsoring U.S. university educations to Asian students around the world. So it's a big part of how we try to do our part to continue that cross-cultural exchange, to give people an opportunity to have a different learning experience and a different learning environment. That's our big one.
Okay.
We do a lot of other work in the local, where our headquarter office in terms of our day-to-day operations is in Sumida-ku. So we work closely with the Sumida-ku government. We do English language teaching classes. Our staff go out and regularly take over an English class in the junior high schools. We support what's called the Sumida-ku Jazz Festival. So there's a street jazz festival for 2 days over the weekend in August, where the area, the ward office area, is covered with about 40 different stages and performing arts. And
did you have a big beer brewery there?
well, there's, Kirin Brewery is not too far.
So it goes very well with the jazz.
Asahi Brewery is around the corner. Yeah, so a lot of that, and you know, we're engaged in vaccination bottle cap programs. So nationwide, we collect bottle caps so that they don't get burned and turn them into vaccinations for kids around the world and that kind of stuff. So a lot of focus on cross-cultural capability, on language, and on education, and how can we do our part to expand people's global awareness.
And then it looks like you're sustaining. I mean, it's a real long-term sort of commitment.
Yeah, I mean, the Diplomats program's in its 26th year. We're quite proud of that. We've been having some discussions with the U.S. Embassy who want to recognize it and expand it, and we think that's a great idea. So we're working with them to try to find ways to take advantage of that in the future as well.
So I mean, great place to be working.
It's a lot of fun.
AIU Japan.
Yeah, there's never a dull moment, I can tell you that. I was explaining earlier my schedule for the last couple of weeks and what it looks like for the next month. And, you know, I don't have too much time to sit around. So, but it's to me, it's we're trying to change. We're trying to recognize the market's different. We're trying to recognize the future in Japan is different, and we think that there's opportunity. Rather than talk about what's not working, let's talk about what is and what's new. Because there's a lot of things happening out there, and we want to take advantage of it.
Wonderful. It's very forward-looking. Well, thank you for sharing your time and sharing your story with the TUJ friends and students and alumni and families. And I hope to have you again in the near future.
Well, thank you for your leadership in the Board of Overseers. But to all of you, thank you for putting the effort and the time into supporting TUJ and to getting out of TUJ a very, very robust and important experience. I think the future really is, as I wrote in my notes from my perspective last year, the future is huge if you take advantage of it and you leverage what you come out of this experience with as you go forward. So good luck to everybody, and look forward to seeing you around. Let's go change the market, huh?